All right, back on the YouTube channel. This is a YouTube exclusive clip for you all. My first exclusive clip was for my season 3 preview, and I answered a couple of your questions there. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that if you missed it. But I promise to be back every week answering your questions, especially as we get ready for and gear up for season 3 and all of the great episodes that we are going to have for you, the great interviews we're going to set for you, the topics we're going to cover. But I didn't want to make you wait for that. So let's get into some of your questions. First question is from Gail in the United Kingdom. Gail asks, given how quickly geopolitical alliances and economic realities are shifting, what frameworks or mental models do you personally use to filter global events and predict which trends are likely to endure versus those that will fade? Well, Gail, thank you for the question. Very thoughtful, very deep, and I could probably spend an entire show just thinking about that, but it is the essence of this program, is identifying what are the big trends and the big geopolitical or, overall economic, social trends that we all need to be thinking about and that we need to be aware of. But these things do change. So I'm going to take your question in parts and pieces here. So the first part of your question was on geopolitical alliances and the economic realities that go with them. So let me be clear that I consider these things to be interconnected. So when we think about the geopolitical issues between countries, when we think about conflict zones, when we think about trade disputes, we think about political ideologies, even when we think about religious differences within societies, in the end, they all have an impact on economics. They have an impact on national security. They have an impact on how well we live. They have an impact on where we travel. And they have an impact on the business decisions that investors make as well as employees. So I don't think of geopolitics and economics in different buckets. They are complementary to each other. And there are some times where we focus more on the political dynamics between national leaders, let's say, and other times where we really zone in on economic realities. When we talk about income inequality, when we talk about a purpose of a business, as we had an episode last season, when we talk about how governments tax businesses and the incentives or disincentives that those policies set up and what that means for societies. There are times where we focus in on one or the other. So what I try to do in terms of what is a framework or a model that I use to filter all of these activities, all of these stories, all these events, it's very simple. The filter that I use is what are the trends that are going to affect the largest number of people the most profoundly. And that is not easy to predict because you don't always know. But somehow for me, it was very clear, 2 years ago when I first launched this show and artificial intelligence was being talked about in a new and different way than it had been before. It was very clear to me that this was going to be transformational. And part of the signal in that was how many different corners of society I was hearing about it from. The business community, the academic community, the scientific community, the national security community. There basically wasn't any aspect, including the healthcare community, that wasn't talking about the potential, the risks, the implications. So when I hear people in the real world talking about a trend or a topic or a concern, and it can affect a broad number of people and fundamentally change the way they do their work or live their lives, that's all I need to know, that I need to ask questions and find out more about what's happening in that space. So that's one. The other thing I try to do when there's something that's a little bit below the surface, maybe people aren't talking about it, and I have to use my intuition to think about what the likelihood is that a certain situation, a certain story, a certain trend is going to have an impact on us, is to look back at history. While things like AI and machine learning and quantum computing and all of these things are new age, you can look back in history at times and places where rising empires and declining powers met in a clash. And you can look at those points in time and draw parallels to the present. Are we seeing something like that? With healthcare innovations of the past, with scientific breakthroughs of the past, with economic shifts and changes, recessions and depressions, boom and busts periods, while what's the phrase? History doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. I find that to be true. And so if I see a trend that appears to be roughly tracking something that we've all seen before, and this isn't just looking back at the last couple of decades, but looking at the last several hundred years, and I feel like I can identify one of those trends in our lives today, I'm going to at least ask questions about it. I'm going to at least talk about it. So it's all about people and what I'm hearing and what I think is affecting them. And then secondarily, it's a lot about history. And what am I understanding about how I see today's events in parallel to anything I've seen in the past? Let me lastly say that when it comes to predicting, what the next big thing is, there's going to be some misses. There's obviously things that are the news of the day or the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year that we never talk about again or that we go 10 years without hearing about. So this is not foolproof. And I encourage all of you to share with me your ideas, because the best way for us on this program to stay ahead of the curve is to hear from you. And if there's things that you're hearing about or you're interested in, I want to hear from those, because then you're going to get me curious and I'm going to go ask more questions. Okay, the second question. All right, this next one is from Nicholas in Germany, just says Germany. You often feature a wide range of experts from different fields. How do you balance sometimes conflicting perspectives to form your own conclusions about where the world is heading? And do you believe optimism or pessimism is the more rational stance today? Great question. So, first of all, I'm very proud that this show does feature a wide range of experts from a wide variety of different fields. And we're going to continue to do that. And if you've listened to my season 3 preview, you know we're going to continue in that direction. Now, the core question here is about balancing conflicting perspectives and forming conclusions. I don't form conclusions on the air on this program for a reason, because I want you to form the conclusions. Now, I do offer an opinion, and it's usually in the form of a perspective that I feel did not get fully fleshed out during the course of an interview. So at the end of most of my conversations, you hear me give a 5 to 10 minute monologue that I hope helps to expand the conversation, maybe even trigger more questions for you. I do offer a point of view, but it's not meant to say I agreed with or disagreed with the guest. It's really meant to complement what we talked about and fill in some of the gaps and offer a perspective that is uniquely mine on how I thought about the subject matter, how I interviewed the guest, and the questions I tried to get at, and the things that I took away from it. So in other words, I'm trying to help expand your learning by letting you know what I learned and how it changed my view, but it doesn't mean it's the definitive conclusions. So the word conclusion to me doesn't exist in the context of this show. The story is never over. The conversation never ends. The debate is never fully settled. This isn't a scientific show where we go out and experiment and then we find out definitively. We continue the conversation. And as far as where do I think, the world is heading today, am I optimistic, am I pessimistic? I am always and forever optimistic. And the reason for that is when you really step back and think about where we are today versus where any of our ancestors ever were in the history of our world, no matter what corner of this planet that you live on, the fact that we have scientific knowledge, international travel, communications, the fact that this podcast exists, that I can talk to billions of people potentially around the world with only a few restrictions in places where governments unfortunately choose to keep those restrictions. The fact that we can all communicate with each other, the fact that you can send me a question and I can answer it in a format like this on a channel like YouTube. What more do you need to show that the world has consistently moved in a direction that is richer, healthier, more awesome, and more free for individual conversation, thought, and exploration than what we're doing here right now, the fact you're listening to me. And if that's all that we have achieved over this period of time up to now, imagine where we're going. I mean, I know every new technology comes with its risks. I am not in any way naive to that. I recognize that tools of the future that will make us healthier, more efficient, more productive, and live longer can also be used to harm people and to hurt societies. And that the same tool that one government can use to expand freedom can be used by another to restrict it. I get all that. But when you think about what we are likely on the cusp of, the kinds of medical breakthroughs that are very likely, based on everything I've read, everything I've heard, everyone I've talked to, including some people on this show, there are diseases that people die from today that they will not die from in a few years. There are disorders that really harm people's quality of life today, and we'll be able to delay or cure those in the future. People will be able to live a quality of life longer than they are today. We will have cures to the incurable in the future, and for many of us, it's going to happen in our lifetime. We are probably going to have significant technological breakthroughs in power generation and transmission that will fundamentally change how human beings everywhere in the world can be productive, be connected, and not harm the planet in the process. There are peace agreements that seem like they are forever away, but there will be future peace agreements on this planet that open up corners of the world to travel that are currently restricted. And with that openness will come collaboration, innovation, will come new scientific discoveries, new cultural learnings. There will be new foods, there will be new songs, there will be new movies, there will be new relationships that come from all of that. And perhaps one of the things that I'm the most optimistic about of all is the likelihood that we human beings will be a more connected and more conscious species than we've ever been before, because we'll have a greater, deeper appreciation of the world we live in and of the society that we have. Now, I've just painted for you a beautiful picture that I hope inspires you and that I hope you share, and I hope for those who have young children makes you excited to have them grow up in this world and to get them ready for it. But I'm not without the knowledge that bad things can and will happen along the way. I'm not without the knowledge that we live on a planet with enough nuclear weapons that we can kill this entire species in a few hours. I am not naive enough to believe that a global pandemic isn't going to happen again. I'm not naive enough to believe that a global war isn't not only possible but likely in our lifetime. I am not naive enough to believe that the same machines that can bring us productivity may, and in fact probably will, lead to mass death on battlefields around the world. I am not naive enough to believe that crime will simply cease to exist because it's easier to stop it. I am not naive enough to believe that AI technologies that allow us to be more efficient in our homes can't also be used by fraudsters to be more efficient in ripping people off. I get all that. And I could dwell on it, and I could be paralyzed by the fear of it, and I could be concerned about it all day. But the good that is likely to come so far outpaces the bad that the bad almost isn't even worth spending more time on than to simply understand the risks and understand how to protect yourself as best you can with a clear-eyed view of the world, and to prepare yourself for those potential outcomes, and more specifically, to make sure that you know how all of those risks may affect your family so that you can properly hedge that risk as best as you can. But that's all that's about. I just want you to be aware of the risks, not obsessed by them. What I want you to be focused on is all of the positive, all of the optimism. And I'll conclude with this example, just because I know that by the time this program is released, who knows what will have happened in the world. So I'm not going to cite a specific conflict zone. But in the last season, in the last 2 seasons, we've talked about conflict zones in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, and in South Asia. And there's plenty more around the world that we could talk about. Now, just to be 100% clear, I understand that the issues that are playing out in those battlefields and in those societies, they date back hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years, and they're not going to be resolved overnight. But I offer this to you. By the time you get to the end of any conversation with anyone who has any knowledge of these conflicts, by the end of the conversation, you always get to a place where even the most radical combatant has almost a glassy-eyed, tearful hope for the future about what a day will look like when there is finally peace. What it will look like, what it will sound like when the guns fall silent and people can embrace and build a future with the issues of the past finally settled and put behind them. And I know how hard it is to see that in the moment when you see a headline about a bombing or a shooting or some horrible terrorist attack or some horrendous military action that ended in the death of many thousands of soldiers or hundreds of civilians. I understand how hard it is to see that light, but the fact that any conversation around conflict usually ends with a vision of resolution, to me, that is the reason why we should always be optimistic. Because wherever there is conflict, there is hope for peace. Wherever there is strife, there is opportunity for a better day. And it's all about which you choose to focus on, and I choose to focus on optimism. But, as the questioner, as Nick asks, we do have to balance that optimism with enough realism that we can hedge our bets as we need to for the future. All right, these were really good questions, and I love talking these things through, and I love hearing you, or I love having you listen to me think these through. I hope it was valuable for you. All this is really about helping you understand how I think and think about this program and the guests I want to bring on, and my perspective on the world. So thank you. Keep the questions coming. You can reach out to me directly, info@brianjmatos.com. Choose any social media channel. Just punch in Brian J. Matos. You'll find me. You can direct message me on any of your favorite social media platforms. And of course, you can leave comments on this or any of my other YouTube videos. I check them all the time. I engage with them. If you just want to leave your questions there or even within this video, feel free to do so. I will collect them, and maybe you'll be featured on one of our upcoming programs, or at least one of our upcoming clips. Thank you all to my YouTube audience for subscribing. If you haven't already, if you stumbled across this and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Would love to have you join this community. And I look forward to having more sessions like this, as well as debuting new episodes very, very soon. Until then, this is Brian J. Matos. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon.